Hi, I'm Dana, and as an autistic person, I feel like it's really easy for me to see red flags in people that my friends are talking to or about. In movies, I get it real quick and I know exactly who the red flag of a person is. But when it comes to my own friendships and relationships, I feel like I miss absolutely every red flag there is. And it's only when there's been some gigantic blowout and I'm really upset about it all and I've lost this person that I'm like, actually, I think maybe I should have known this was going to happen from the beginning. Actually, there were a lot of things that were hinting that this was how it was going to go. And I didn't even ignore them. I straight up didn't see them, you know? There were glaring red flags about these people. And I was like, maybe it's just fuchsia, maybe it's orange. But I feel like I also see it in my friends when I've been like, this person's a massive red flag, there's this and this and this and all of these other things that I think mean that maybe you should be careful here. And they've been like, no, it's gonna be fine, it's gonna be great. And then 3 months later they're like, so those red flags you mentioned, and I'm like, yeah, I do this too. So as I'm trying to learn and improve and not land myself in these really upsetting and horrible situations, I've come up with a bunch of things that I keep an eye out for. And I'm not saying it's the healthiest thing to have to do, but I do feel as an autistic person who's been taken advantage of and abused repeatedly, it is something that I need to do because I seem to just take to the wrong people, you know? And I thought sharing this list with you guys might help some other people out. So let's get into it. My very first point is that you exclusively bond over trauma. And before we get into it properly, I do want to put out a very clear disclaimer of a lot of these things depend on context, you know? One of my current closest friends that I've been friends with for 2 years now and trust with my life, we've definitely bonded over trauma a whole bunch, but it was never exclusively that, you know? One of the more recent friendship breakups that I had, it should have been clear to me from the start, I think, because a lot of the other people I was friends with at the time specifically wasn't friends with that person because they were like, all they talk about is trauma. And it's not appropriate, you know? It's not a way to build a relationship. Obviously, a lot of autistic people, and I do predominantly make friends with other autistic people, we have a bunch of trauma, we have a whole bunch of trauma and we've had a whole bunch of stuff go on, and it can be really healing and really beautiful and really nice to be able to speak about those things and have them be fully understood by someone. I think that for me, for the most part, sharing my trauma within friendships is very important and it's something that I need to be able to do, but it's about doing it at the appropriate times when the other person is ready to listen to it and not having your entire relationship based around the fact that you have shared trauma. The friend that I currently have that I definitely have a lot of shared trauma with, and we totally talk about it and joke about it and everything else like I have in other friendships. We have so much other stuff going on, you know? We bond over the things that we enjoy, we bond over the things that we like, we bond over all sorts of other things to create a really full-fledged friendship that can actually last and can actually benefit both of us. And when we do share our trauma, it tends to be a healing situation where we both feel better for it, rather than consistently reliving trauma with someone and only really talking about the trauma that you've been through and the traumatic experiences that you've had and the ways that those have affected you, you know? And I've had a bunch of those friendships and they've never ended well. And sort of in the same vein as that, obviously a lot of autistic people, not all of us, we are all different, but a whole bunch of us have been in very traumatic and abusive situations. And I feel like that means that I've had quite a lot of people, including my ex-girlfriend, I've only had 2 relationships, and doing the oh well they're not as bad as this was a major contributor to why my second relationship lasted as long as it did. You know, I'd been in an 8-year-long abusive relationship, so then getting with this other person, everything that they did was so much nicer than my harsh relationship. They barely had to do anything, and I was like, oh my god, that's so sweet, you act like you actually like me as a person sometimes, you know, because my ex never did. And I've absolutely experienced that in friendships over and over, where the next group of people I meet is that little bit nicer than the last one, and I'm like, oh, this is gonna be great. And then 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down the line, I'm like, oh, you're not actually good people or good friends, you're just better than the other shitty ones that I had. And there's so much stuff that looking back I should have acknowledged and should have considered as a red flag and seen as a warning sign that something was going on, and instead I was just like, well, I've been through worse. Everyone does something bad at some point, and everyone else that I've had's been way worse than this, so I can just keep going and it's gonna be alright because it's not as bad as that was. And I think that the major reason that I was able to recognise that as a red flag and able to actually pull that out of all like my past relationships and reflect on it and be like, I see what I did there, is because I now have really, really great friends, you know? It's not that they are better than the best that I've had, it's not that it's the best I've had yet, it's that they are genuinely amazing people. You know, I don't compare the things that they do to things that have happened to me in the past because they're not similar to the shitty things that have happened to me in the past. There's no comparison of like, well, it's better than that, because it's just great. It's just brilliant. It's just really nice. And I feel like it is sort of vital to have those really pleasant experiences and meet the really good people to be able to actually be like, oh no, I was just going for what wasn't as shit as the rest of it had been. My next point kind of applies to a much wider lens than just autistic people, but it's the people that make jokes about things. So for me specifically, the ones where I was like, that's a red flag that I should have noticed was, for example, one of the other friendships that I've had turn sour more recently made quite a few jokes about me pulling the autism card when I couldn't do things due to being autistic or because of my anxiety. And it was always a joke, you know, there was always a laugh with it, but it made me feel deeply uncomfortable and really hurt because like, I need you to accommodate as a friend in this situation because I can't do this thing. And rather, like, even though you are accommodating to it, you're doing it in a way that's like shaming me and invalidating me and making me feel really bad because I'm just pulling the autism card. And I just overlooked it. I just wrote it off as a joke. And then it happened more and more. And I was like, oh shit, wait, actually, like, I know you're laughing while you say this and acting like it's a joke, but you're actually saying Dana's being frustrating because I don't want to accommodate to their autism. And it's actually really shitty and horrible. But it was only when he was being shitty and horrible in other ways that I was like, oh, I should have known that you could be like this based on that. But I say that applies to much more than just like the autism stuff, because as much as that was the thing that I've noticed most recently to base this on, I also know that in future, like in the past, I've definitely laughed at like random jokes about things that are inappropriate and are offensive. And, you know, I can claim I laughed along because of a mask or because I liked the person or whatever else. However I did it, I laughed along at very inappropriate and offensive jokes that I shouldn't have laughed along with. And I get how difficult it can be to like call it out in the moment, especially if it's like racism or homophobia or something like that. But you don't necessarily need to call it out, you know, it is the best thing to do. I think that you should try to. But as a very anxious autistic person, chances are I'm not going to call it out. But in future, I am going to distance myself from those people, because if you're making those types of jokes, at least some part of you believes it. Even if you're like, no, I just meant it as a joke, it's just ironic. I don't trust that anymore. I see that as a massive red flag and I will pull away from those people. I'm not doing it. I don't trust it at all. My next point is that they take advantage of you or weaponize your naivety. And this is a tricky one. This is where I think that my trust issues kick into hyperdrive and I'm like hyper vigilant to it. And I think that I probably go a little bit too far, if anything, with this one. But that's because I am quite a naive person, you know? I have repeatedly been taken advantage of and not realised until sometimes like months after the situation. Or like even more recently with the person that was making autism jokes, there were multiple times that they did things where I was like, I don't quite know about that. And then when I caught them out doing something, they were like, I'm so sorry, I just keep taking advantage of you. And I was like, you keep taking advantage of me? Like, as far as I was aware, that was the first time it had happened. So obviously there's a whole bunch of other stuff he's been doing that I just did not pick up on. I just had no idea, because I am quite naive. I am quite easy to take advantage of. I'm a massive people pleaser. I will do whatever I can to try and make people happy and to try and make sure that other people don't have the same experiences that I've had that made me feel terrible and that have like traumatized me and severely affected how I live my life and how I treat people and everything else. You know, I don't want other people to go through that shit. But it means that like I absolutely do not spot when someone is just taking advantage of me, or when someone's using that naivety to their own advantage, you know? It's the same thing. But it's one of those things that I have gotten to some degree quite paranoid about, because I just repeatedly had people taking advantage of me. You know, one of the main reasons that I don't speak to my mum and brother anymore was that they were constantly taking advantage of me and having me do things I really didn't want to do. And that has just happened in so many friendships and relationships that I've had. And like I say, I feel like I still really struggle to spot it. I quite often rely on my friends at this point. I will message the group chat and be like, hey guys, someone asked me to do this, so I'm thinking of doing this. Is that a good idea? And honestly, like 7 times out of 10, they're like, no, Dana, like, no. You know, like there's being nice and there's doing things for the people that'll be nice to you and do the things for you. And then there's the people that will just consistently request things, and especially people that make like such subtle requests that I don't realise it's a request. I think that I've like picked up on something and I'm gonna do a nice thing, when actually they're just like, oh, if I like do these vague hints, Dana just does whatever the fuck I want. And my final point is that they make their behaviour your problem and your issue. I cannot put into words how many friendships and relationships I've had. Obviously I've only had 2 relationships, but I've had like numerous friendships where this has happened, because people will be shitty, they will behave badly, they will behave in really crappy ways that I don't believe people should act, and I don't think that people should be treated in the ways that they're doing. You know, they will be genuinely awful people. And obviously I'm trying to learn to like stand up for myself and set boundaries and the like, and I've been trying to learn that for a really long time. It's just that in the last like year it's become absolutely vital to my survival that I do so. And when you set those boundaries and when you make clear that it's due to their behaviour, suddenly it's like you have a problem, you have an issue. Why do you always have to bring these things up? Why do you always have to have an issue with things? Why can't you ever just be happy with anything? And it's like, your behaviour is the issue. You as a person is the issue, not me. Me having an issue with you behaving like that is based on your behaviour. If you were a better person, if you were a kinder person, if you were a nice person, we wouldn't be having the issue. And especially people will try and blame it on like, well, you misunderstood because you're autistic. And I'm like, I did not misunderstand you being an asshole. I'm sorry, I didn't. There's lots of social cues that I do miss. There's lots of things that go straight over my head. You being an asshole isn't one of them. And it can be especially difficult because I feel like so many people just do not want to face the fact that there are consequences to their behaviour. People will treat you the way that you treat them, etc. So people are just... I feel like I've had people that have fully convinced themselves that actually I am the issue, like me personally, and not their behaviour in the slightest. And we're talking, there's been situations where people have lost like multiple friends alongside me because I'm like, they shouldn't treat people like that, and everyone's like, no, actually they shouldn't. And suddenly I'm this like manipulative asshole that's made them lose all of their friends and whatever else, when it's literally just a case of you didn't behave in a way that means that you deserve friends. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. You should be a better person if you want people to like you. People like better people. But the people that's happened with have always been the people where throughout the friendship I've been the one that's always apologising, that's always like, oh sorry I did that, oh sorry I said that, oh you're right about this thing. And then when it gets to the end and it turns out that I was right to think that I might be a bit of an asshole, I'm like, oh, all those times I was absolutely right, and then you managed to convince me that it was all my fault and it was me being a shithead and I was apologising when actually I was just reacting in a perfectly valid way to your behaviour. And as we finish up here, because that was my final point, I want to remind everyone that context plays massively into this. There's so much going on in every friendship, every relationship, every just like life situation. As much as these are things that I view as red flags, they are just things that make me a little bit more vigilant, you know? Somebody doing all these things doesn't necessarily mean they're a terrible person. And especially with the last one as well, sometimes it is our fault, you know? Sometimes we are the problem. It can be hard to tell when that's happening. That's where you need to like self-reflect and be self-aware when you can, and just try to be a decent person. I think that most people, if you just try, you do pretty well, you know? But I'm so finished with speaking. So you can follow me here if you want to see more content. I post 3 times a week at the minute. That's quite excessive for me. It's quite a lot. I'm really trying hard. And I also post over on TikTok and Instagram. I post on Instagram sometimes. I post on TikTok every single day. And if you want to donate to me monetarily, although there's no pressure and you do not have to, I will have my Patreon and my Ko-fi page linked down below. But you don't have to, there's no pressure. I get that none of us have any money, we're all poor and it's all awful and there's a cost of living crisis, and if you haven't got it, you don't have it, and you don't have to, it's fine. But if you want to, it's there. And for now, that's me done. So whoever you are, wherever you are, I hope you have a lovely morning, evening, day, afternoon, week, month, year, and I'll see you again in a couple of days.